Hey guys, welcome to UFC Betting Edge, and today we'll be talking about the UFC Fight Night at Fight Island, headlined by Cory Sandhagen and Marlon Moraes. And before we get there, we'll quickly recap what happened last week. So it was a fight main card, and I was able to predict three correctly, and the co-main and the main event was where I faltered big. In the main event, Holly Holm totally dominated the matchup with Irene Aldana. Irene kept circling in the wrong direction, did not try to intercept, kept following Holly Holm and got peppered. She did not show adjustments in her game during the fight, and I was banking on Aldana improving the improvements she's shown in the last few fights, that she will continue to do so, and that wasn't really the fact, or there could be some other problems, but it was definitely a bad pick. Again, in the co-main event, Carlo Felipe's output totally shut down Jordan De Castro, and in his fight against Greg Hardy, I thought it was his output was low due to the foot injury, but it seemed like he definitely has a cardio concern for 3-round fights. So that was the other one that I got wrong. The fight between Germaine de Randamie and Juliana Pena, even though it didn't end with the same, I thought it would probably go to decision or a third round TKO, but it didn't end in submission. Totally surprised me. But Germaine de Randamie, as I knew, would be able to impose a will. She won first round. Pena came in the second. Germaine submitted Pena in the third. Then with Kyler Phillips and Cameron Ellis, I knew Kyler Phillips will be way too much for Cameron Ellis, and he would be able to win the fight wherever the fight goes. Exactly ended up happening, and with the first fight, the card opener, Dusko Todorovic versus Dequan Townsend, also went in a similar way. I thought it probably would go to a decision or end in the later rounds. It ended in the second round with a TKO finish. I was really impressed. He imposed as well and showed that he could be a contender if he gets a couple of wins. So I still ended up making some money, but wasn't as good as the past week. So hoping that we can do better in this 6-fight main card. And without further ado, let's dive in. So the card opener, Yusuf Zalal versus Ilia Topuria. Now, this is a really exciting fight. So let's start with Zalal. So Zalal is 5'10". He's 3-0 in the UFC. He's beaten Jordan Griffin, Austin Lingo, and Peter Barrett, if I'm not mistaken, and he looked pretty good in those fights. So Zalal is basically a movement-based fighter who usually has better footwork than his opponent. He will circle around, and as the opponent pressure him, he would move in and out and keeps them guessing with sudden attacks with knees or takedowns. And talking about mixing things, his biggest attribute is mixing strikes with takedowns. And he uses a really good knee that comes up the middle. And for anyone shooting a takedown on him, it could be very, very detrimental. He has good low and high kicks and has really good timing on them. Zalal is a long fighter, and the utilization of kicks at the end of the punches is one of the ways that Zalal can be tagged. So I'm sure Topuria will be keeping an eye on finishing his combination with kicks, which he does sometimes. So Jordan Griffin was able to expose some of the ground deficiencies that Zalal has, and Topuria is definitely capable of exploiting those with his explosive and slick ground game. Jordan Griffin was also able to secure Zalal's back while standing and as well on the ground in rounds 1 and round 2 as well. So that tells the ground game of Zalal is still evolving, and this is something Topuria will have his eye on. Zalal is usually pretty active from the bottom. Now, talking about Topuria. So, Topuria is an undefeated fighter fighting out of Spain. He's originally Georgian. He is 5'7" and fights out of orthodox stance. And his game plan is fairly simple. He wants to strike with his opponent only to get his takedown and then submit his opponent. He's fairly aggressive fighters who hold his ground and pressures his opponents. And this kind of fits well into Zalal's game, as we talked about. He has really good left hooks, good knees in the clinch. He has a grappling heavy attack. He has a really, really good ground game and will look actively for submissions. He's really good in taking the back and then usually transitions into Dars, Anaconda, or traps his opponents in guillotines in transactions. Chokes are his go-to, as we just talked, and he has had 2 wins by guillotine and 1 by rear naked choke and 1 by Anaconda choke. We have also seen that he packs one-punch knockout power, so Zalal has to be wary of that. Even though he's an undefeated fighter, he has faced adversity before in at least 2 to 3 fights of his. The most noteworthy of them was his fight against Steven Gonzalez, his last fight, where he got tacked by a big head kick and was grounded. But he regained his composure, shot for the takedown, and eventually ended up knocking Steven out in the second round. And a point to note is Steven was 6'1", much taller than Zalal and way taller than Topuria, who's 5'7". So, in summary, I think this is an extremely close fight, and I can't wait for it. Even though Topuria is a debutant, he's very skilled, especially in the grappling game. Zalal has already shown how good he is with movement and versatile attacks that includes takedowns, jabs, step-in knees, and he keeps his opponents guessing. Topuria will look to take it to the ground even though he might have power advantage on the feet. His footwork is not as good as Zalal, so ground game will be the path of least resistance for him. However, if Zalal tries to take Topuria down, which he did with Austin Lingo, he did it with Jordan Griffin, he might find himself in a world of trouble. Nicely timed knee strikes when Topuria commits for a takedown will be extremely crucial for Zalal. In conclusion, I feel that even though Zalal's footwork is superior, Topuria will be able to engage Zalal in clinch and will be able to transition to his back and choke him out. So that's my prediction. Topuria by submission. Second fight on the card is between the big guys. It's in the heavyweight division. So Tom Aspinall versus Alan Baudot. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. So Tom Aspinall is an extremely big guy who's 6'5", with a rather shorter reach at 78 inches. He will probably have a fair bit of weight advantage on Baudot, considering that his last weigh-in was at 250 pounds. Based on the tape I've watched on him, he seems to be a smart fighter who approaches fights cautiously. In spite of being the bigger guy in the octagon, he does not bum rush people, and he likes to have what Darren Till calls the invisible pressure, where he closes the distance between him and his opponents, and then he keeps faking and feinting and waiting for his opponent to react and throw an ill-advised punch so that he can counter. He's very calm for such a young man, and he measures his strikes for most part. He has devastating power, especially in his right hand. Most of his knockouts have come via straight right, which I was really impressed with. Straight strikes are usually the quickest, and fighter throwing them tend to land more often and more crisper than usual. He has also shown improvements as he's progressed through his fights. The only fight I could watch where he lost was by a heel hook, and he was a brown belt jiu-jitsu guy at that point in time. Now he's got his black belt, and I believe that he is going to have a huge ground advantage in this fight. Now let's talk about Alain Baudot. Baudot is a French newcomer coming into this matchup with 8-1 record. He usually fights in the light heavyweight division, so I expect him to be a little heavier than usual, but he's still going to be much lighter than Tom Aspinall. Baudot's lone loss was to UFC light heavyweight guy Dalcha Lujimbula, and he lost via quick knockout. He has since had 2 more fights, with the last being in April 2019. So it's fair to say that he hasn't been fairly active lately. In his last fight against Todd Stout, which happened in my city, Toronto, he looked tentative in the first few rounds. He was taken down numerous times and ended up being submitted, even though the record says that he won by disqualification. I'm not exactly sure what how that worked, but that's what the record says. The one thing that goes in Baudot's favor is that he's probably used to fighting big guys in Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou, who we all know are a part of UFC heavyweight division. He came out guns blazing against Dalcha Lujimbula and tried to press him to the cage and got into a firefight and ended getting smacked clean on the face and bing, lights out. Baudot has really good judo throws, particularly the hip toss, that usually comes into play when his opponents try to take him down in the middle of the cage. It'd be harder to pull off against Aspinall, who's much heavier, in case he decides to shoot. In my opinion, Baudot's best strikes are his spinning back elbows and back fists, and he has really good timing in them. And that's probably one thing that Tom Aspinall needs to be extremely careful of. So, in order to summarize, the 2 opponents have similar experience, but I feel Aspinall will have significant size and power advantage in this one. Baudot might gain some weight to negate that, but that might make him a little slower and impact his gas tank. An important point to note that is Baudot has trained with UFC heavy hitters like Ngannou and Cyril Gane, and he knows what it feels to be with huge guys such as Aspinall. Overall, I feel Aspinall has multiple paths to victory. KO standing up, or taking this to the ground and utilize his high-level ground game, which probably will be the path of least resistance. To sum it up in one line, I see Aspinall finishing Baudot fairly easily via knockout. So the next fight is between Marcus Perez and Dricus du Plessis. I love the name, Dricus du Plessis. So let's talk about Perez first. He has alternate wins and losses since debuting in December of 2017 against Eric Anders. He started with a loss, and his last fight against Wellington Turman also resulted in a loss via unanimous decision. He stays pretty loose and throws a lot of flashy techniques, which have hardly seen land on any of his opponents. He still has power and can hurt his opponent, but those strikes are not very effective. He has a very powerful left body kick, which will work great against a du Plessis, who mostly fights in the orthodox stance and in past has taken those body kicks against Roberto Soldic, if I'm not mistaken. Marcos Perez, that is, he lacks the fundamental techniques in the striking game. He also keeps his hands fairly low, and he is susceptible to getting hit. He definitely has good grappling, and both of his UFC wins have come through chokes and fairly early in the fight. His gas tank is improving. He took the short notice fight against Eric Anders and was gassed in the second round. Since then, he's shown a fair bit of improvement on his cardio. But with his style, where he moves a lot and he throws flashy techniques, spinning techniques, it makes him susceptible to getting tired, or when he's being pressured, the fight is not going his way. Now, talking about Duplessis. Duplessis is 6'1", and he's amassed a pretty impressive record, which stands at 14-2. He's debuting in the UFC after getting some good experience around around Africa and Europe. He has won championships in various organizations, so he's fairly experienced in the high-pressure scenario, which will be his UFC debut as well. He's South Africa's K1 kickboxing champion and definitely has really good kicks. However, majority of his wins have come through submissions, where he prefers chokes. Duplessis has also got decent wrestling, and I think he will have the necessary ground game to thwart Perez's ground attacks. So in summary, Duplessis is making his debut against Perez, who has shown glimpses of promise against the lower level guys that he could easily take down, but he hasn't been able to make a mark against a more polished opposition. Even though his ground game is pretty good, his striking fundamentals are not there yet. He throws a lot of flashy capoeira stuff that only works when you have sound fundamentals. Duplessis, on the other hand, is South African K1 champion and Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has also shown warrior spirit to come back from a deficit to win fights. Additionally, the championship experience that he's had in Europe and Africa will help him tremendously in this fight. I see Duplessis utilizing his all-round skills to win by decision. So next fight is also in the heavyweight division, and it's between Ben Rothwell and Marcin Tybura. Now, Ben Rothwell is a big guy. Even though everyone is big in heavyweight division, Ben Rothwell is especially big, and he's coming off of 2 wins and looking to climb the heavyweight ladder. As I mentioned, he stands at 6'4", has 78-inch reach, and cuts down to 265, and will be the bigger guy in the matchup. Rothwell throws about 3.3 strikes per minute with an accuracy of 43%, while he absorbs 4.4 strikes per minute and has a defense of 46%. He hardly utilizes takedowns, but has a really good takedown defense. Now, the reason why his strikes absorbed are really high is against the faster opposition, he tends to absorb a lot of strikes. So I think that's what it could be attributed to. Off late, the fights that Ben Rothwell has lost to were, as I mentioned, the faster fighters in Junior Dos Santos and Andrei Arlovsky, where they used their movement to bamboozle him. Rothwell always pushes forward, especially when he knows he has the power advantage. He also has a granite chin that lets him move forward with reckless abandon. He constantly changes his stances and tries to baffle his opponents with changing angles of punches. He attacks with the left straight and right jab, utilizes a fair bit of kicks, and uses a fair variety of strikes that are not very conventional. Now, talking about Tybura, He's also a big guy with stands at 6'3", 78-inch reach, and he weighs in about 250 pounds. So Rothwell on fight night might have a 20 to 30 pound weight advantage. Tybura lands about 3.3 strikes a minute and absorbs about 2.8 strikes per minute, and his accuracy and defense is both slightly better than that of Ben Rothwell. Tybura is a jiu-jitsu black belt and a very good grappler, and even though most of his fights don't go to the ground, he definitely has the capability, as he showed against the Sergey Spivak fight, where he took him down and dominated him there. He's coming off of 2 victories and is looking to extend his run in the heavyweight division. He's a mobile heavyweight who likes to switch stances. However, his movement can go down if the opponent is pressing him aggressively. He has fast jabs, nice front kicks. He blends it. He'd probably have good speed advantage against Ben Rothwell. If he could utilize takedowns, which I think will be hard to get, it might be the easiest path to victory. Even though I don't think Marcin Tybura has the ability to finish Rothwell, but he might be able to control him if he can get the fight there. Tybura has shown vulnerability sometimes when he doesn't cut angles and goes straight back when pressured. Also, in his last 2 knockout losses, he was backed up to the cage and couldn't cut angles, absorbed a bunch of punches to get knocked out. He probably wants the cage to be behind him so that when he absorbs punches, he has something to fall back on, but it presents a much bigger problem, in my opinion. So I think he should try to stay away from the cage at all times. In summary, this is a tricky matchup, especially given the odds. So Rothwell is coming in at minus 188, and Tybura is coming in at plus 139, and I think the odds should be closer than that. In a way, both fighters possess a key attribute that the other person finds hard to deal with. So Rothwell struggles against quicker fighters who know how to maintain their distance. Tybura is definitely quicker and will have this speed advantage. On the flip side, Tybura struggles with opponents who can put pressure on him, and like Abdurakhimov and Sakai did to get the knockout. And Rothwell puts the pressure even though he's not as quick as Sakai or Abdurakhimov. This is a coin toss, and even though I lean on Rothwell winning this, the odds make it a little hard for me. I would have bet Rothwell on anything under sorry about that, anything under minus 150, but at minus 190, minus 180, it's a little hard for me. I'll probably stay away from betting on this one, but if you put a gun to my head, I'll say Ben Rothwell by knockout. So the next fight is the co-main event, and I'm really excited about this fight, particularly for Barboza. So Barboza is going to have his second fight in the featherweight division, and out of the last 6 fights, he's lost 5 of them. That said, in my opinion, he won 2 of those 5 lost fights, one against Ige and the other against Paul Felder. But we also have to remember that Barboza in the last 6 fights have fought absolute beasts in the lightweight division, including Khabib and Kevin Lee. So coming to featherweight and fighting Makwan Amirkhani is probably a step down, at least on paper. Barboza is an explosive striker. We all know about him. He has probably one of the best kicking game in the UFC. He's got devastating leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks. He generates a lot of power with those, and they can knock the opponents out even when he's tired. Barboza, even though he got a little tired against his featherweight fight with Dan Ige, he still fought a really high-paced fight, and Dan Ige brought it to him. Barboza was able to floor Dan Ige once in the first round and was able to dominate first and the second round, and then the third round, Dan Ige came back a little bit with more volume, and that's when I'm talking about the tiredness of Barboza that probably cost him the fight. It shouldn't have, but it did. So now coming to Makwan Amirkhani. Amirkhani has a very crowd-pleasing style in bursts. So he comes out hard in the first, where he throws some quick strikes to set up his takedowns. Even though Amirkhani is a really good wrestler, the takedowns and the throws that he utilizes require high energy. If he dominates the position, he goes for submissions, particularly chokes. If Amirkhani's opponents are able to weather the storm, which comes in a form of takedown or a flurry of strikes, and their opponents are able to get back on their feet, they have a good chance of winning the rounds, particularly because of the style that the style that Amirkhani utilizes. So, has he changed his style and incorporated more technique and less horsepower? Probably with John Kavanagh in his corner. He probably is maturing, and we've seen that he's taken a much measured approach against Jason Knight, where he used the high amplitude attacks only when Jason Knight that is, was defending and not particularly prepared for it. However, he got dropped by Jason Knight twice in the first round. Makwan has good right check hook, and he uses it often. Also, Burgos landed 4 body shots around the 4th minute mark of round 2, and that's when Makwan Amirkhani started getting gassed out after winning the first round against Shane Burgos. And I think that could be a very important strategy for Barboza to get him tired early by kicking the body, and we know how hard Barboza hits. Makwan Amirkhani has a really good setup in his last fight with Danny Henry, where he went for a flying knee, closed the distance to get the body lock takedown, and then in the scramble, when Henry tried to reverse the position, he got the neck and transitioned into an anaconda choke for the finish. This is probably the kind of attack that might give Barboza some problem, if any. I think Barboza is explosive himself, and he'll be able to take care of the explosion aspect in the fight. Now, in conclusion, Amirkhani took a more measured approach against Jason Knight and Danny Henry, who were not known to be better strikers than himself on paper. However, against Arnold Allen and Shane Burgos, he wanted to overwhelm them right in the beginning, so that they haven't had their eye in yet. It didn't work with either of them, and I think Amirkhani lost a split decision against Arnold Allen, and he lost via stoppage by Burgos. So Amirkhani usually has to work for his takedowns and scrambles, and it costs him a lot of energy. He's explosive, and the explosive energy is dangerous to your opponent, but dangerous to yourself too. And I feel that Amirkhani needs to change or tweak his style a little bit in order to move to the next level. With the quality of wrestlers that Barboza has faced in Khabib and Kevin Lee, Amirkhani is not going to bring anything new. Barboza himself has a lot of explosive power, and taking him down would cost Amirkhani a lot of energy in case he chooses to overwhelm them early. If Amirkhani takes a more measured approach, Barboza will piece him together real quick. So I think Edson will be able to handle Makwan's explosions and then take over once Amirkhani is tired. So I see Barboza winning late by TKO. Well, now the headliner. It's between Marlon Moraes and Cory Sandhagen. Now, both of these fighters kind of were at the contendership status. They probably still are, but this fight is really important to cement their position as a top 5 guy in the bantamweight division, or top of the top 5 guys. Marlon is coming off of a contentious decision win against Aldo after losing the title bid against Henry Cejudo, where he started doing really well in the first round, but Cejudo came back and ended up ground and pounding him. Cory Sandhagen, similar case, he was winning all his fights, beat Assunção by decision, and then the title eliminator with Aljamain Sterling was set up, and Aljamain Sterling came in with a quick submission, and that's how Sandhagen's title run was snapped at the moment. So this fight is extremely important for both of these fighters, especially Moraes, considering he's the older guy, and he would want to put a stamp on this one. So let's go with Moraes first. Moraes is a powerhouse in the bantamweight division, and he can shut anyone's lights out, including Cory Sandhagen's. Moraes has a tendency to clip his opponents early, and if he catches them flush, that'd be it. Moraes uses really good switch kicks often, and he used it perfectly in the Jimmy Rivera fight and the Aljamain Sterling fight, even though Aljamain Sterling caught the knee from the fight. Moraes is dangerous both at feet and on the ground, especially when he has hurt his opponent. If Moraes hurts Sandhagen, he won't hesitate to jump for a guillotine or a rear naked, just like he did with Rafael Assunção. We gotta talk about Moraes' killer leg kicks. He almost got the finish with Cejudo, and he hit him with blistering leg kicks to thwart Cejudo's attack in the first round. His kicks against Assunção were really good too. And considering the fact that Cory Sandhagen is extremely mobile, I think those leg kicks will be the most important weapon for Marlon Moraes. Now, we have also seen Moraes slow down before, especially when the opponent starts to pressure him, like Cejudo did. Sandhagen puts a tremendous amount of pressure on his opponents, whether it's grappling or striking. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Now, talking about Sandhagen, he's an extremely tall bantamweight at 5'11", and also has a couple of inches of reach on Marlon Moraes. He definitely has the better cardio, and he trains at Colorado at elevation. So I think he will be good to fight 5 rounds, which will be his first fight for 5 rounds. Sandhagen maintains his distance even when he's pressuring the opponent. He has good low kicks and also has great flying knees and double knees in his arsenal. He put Mario Batista down by using one of those fancy knees. Sandhagen fakes and feints a lot with his movement, and he throws so much variety in his striking that his striking accuracy is fairly high. Sandhagen fires a strong left hook from the orthodox position, which I think could be the money punch in denting Marlon Moraes' cardio. Sandhagen has legit grappling and is dangerous from the top and from the bottom. He has got nasty ground and pound, and especially his elbows. He submitted Mario Batista using a chain of submissions that started with reverse triangle and ended with a perfect armbar. Also, another thing to mention is his very flexible limbs. It's hard to submit Sandhagen with conventional arm bars or leg locks, because he has really flexible body, like he showed in the Yuri Alcantara fight, even though the position of Yuri's leg could be better, but something to keep note of. And another X factor in this fight is Cory Sandhagen's ability to withstand damage and then come back, as he did in the Alcantara fight, where he was completely being blown out of the water in the first round, came back and managed to ground and pound Alcantara. So, in conclusion, this fight is going to be very close, and it's going to be an amazing stylistic matchup. Moraes has the speed and power advantage, especially early on. Moraes' best path to victory is catching Sandhagen early, but if he pressures him a lot early, that opens him to being gassed out in the second or the third or the fourth round. Sandhagen usually fights at his own pace, where he pressures the opponent with movement, fakes and feints, and constantly keeps attacking them. Sterling was the only guy to score a victory against him in the UFC, and he did it by bringing the fight to Sandhagen early, and it paid off. I probably see Moraes deploying the same strategy. Question is, will it be enough? In my opinion, we are going to see a level up Sandhagen, who would weather the storm early and then come back to overwhelm Moraes for a stoppage victory. It's not the most confident bet, but I am fairly confident that based on the tapes that I watched on the two fighters, this will probably not go the distance. So one of the two possible bets on this fight could be straight win for Sandhagen, or the fight does not go the distance. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the share, like, subscribe button, and I will really appreciate it. Please leave your comments below about what you think about the predictions, and I will be happy to interact with you, and let's get better at this, with some collaboration.